Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Entrepreneur's Inner Game podcast. I have a wonderful guest to introduce to you today. His name is Daniel Giordano, and he started off creating beautiful homes for the affluent. He did this for 20 years, and then he had a defining moment. His first child was born, and he decided to figure out how to be the father and husband he wanted to be that was going to be at home with his family. So Dan changed course, and he now helps people worldwide to transform their businesses and impact more lives with the power of the internet, influencing influencers and inspiring world changers to get off the sidelines and live life all in. I love that, Daniel, and thank you so much for being here with us today on the Entrepreneur's Inner Game podcast.
Well, thank you for having me here, Nina. It's a privilege and an honor.
I'm so excited to dig into stuff with you, and I'm intrigued by this pivotal time in your life when your first child was born, and you made a big change in your life then, didn't you?
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind it? What was the mindset?
Well, there was a couple of things that really stood out to me at that time. One was I started to ask myself the question, why do I do what I do? Right. A lot of times I believe, especially if you're brought up in a family business or you're brought up in the traditional model of go to school, get a good education and get a good job. And then, we classify that as success. We're just following that model of what our parents believed was right for us. And I just started to question, right? And one of the fascinating things was, being here in Palm Beach, I got to work for a lot of affluent people along the ocean, with multi-million-dollar homes. And I would always ask them questions. I would always say, I probably should have started a podcast back then, right? It's like, because I would always just ask them, it's like, how did you get here? What did you do differently? What do you do for a living? How did you figure out what you were going to do? And there was one specific guy that I remember I was working in his home. It was a $10+ million home on the beach. And it was one of like his 5 homes throughout the world. But he was just a really down to earth guy. And I would always just sit and talk with him, right? Everybody else was coming with their hand out, to get paid. And I was coming asking questions. And he had gone through a challenge with his son, where his son actually died from alcoholism in his late 20s. Right. And he had told me, it's like, if there was one thing I could do differently, I would have spent more time with my kids, because I was building an empire and neglecting my family. And it always sat with me. And I was like, it's not that I, grew up with a bad, family environment. It was just, I grew up with, my dad was a workhorse, taught me a great work ethic, taught me to be an entrepreneur, all of these great things that happened. But the thing that wasn't there was that connection of spending time, throwing a ball, playing games together, doing that type of stuff. Right. And I just knew I wanted something different. Right. So for me, I just remember the day I went home and I looked at my wife and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up, but I'm getting rid of the contracting business. We're going to figure this out and downsize and just kind of figure out what's the next step here. And it was a radical shift. We literally got rid of everything that we were living in Boca Raton at the time, on the water, beautiful home. And I said, I just want to, downsize, take all the financial pressure off of me and really figure out some things. And that was my introduction into, what would seem would be overnight success, but it took me a couple of years, right, of banging my head against the wall until I figured something out, right? And then, the rest is, kind of history.
And that was a big moment, because it took some courage, didn't it, to step away from, the nice home and the lifestyle to start again, as it were. But you had your priorities, you had your sense of purpose in place, didn't you?
Yeah. And I often say, I was like, that the home that we lived in then, I miss those days. The kids were much younger, the first 2, right? So I tell my wife, I was like, those were probably the best days for me, like of just, no pressure, just being able to hang out, being able to, just be present with the kids, right? With no distractions, no, traveling and all the other stuff that I've done since, right? But just being able to be focused for that time was just an amazing experience that I wouldn't trade.
Now, I know that you do some excellent work in high ticket sales. And this is an area which I know that a lot of people who are watching and listening will be wanting to know more about. How do you sell services at a higher price point? What is it that separates entrepreneurs who are selling at maybe a lower or more of an average price point? I'm talking in terms of, consulting, coaching services in
Right.
general. What separates them from the entrepreneurs who are able to really take it up a level and they feel confident to sell their services at a much higher than average price point?
Yeah. So with that, I think the number one thing is belief, right? Belief and the mindset that what you have to offer can help somebody go from A to B, whatever the product or service is that you're selling. And for me, there's been times where I've not resonated with a certain offer, and you could see it based on the sales performance. It's like, this will this really help people, right? Can it help them, or can it be better, right? But one of the things that I can say is, the first thing is belief. The second thing is you're looking at somebody that literally said no to a sales opportunity, many years ago, after I had sold tens of millions of dollars worth of products and services, right? I literally said, I am not a sales guy, right? I don't like sales, all the things we tell ourselves, right? And program ourselves with, right? And one of the fascinating things was, when I finally caved and decided, okay, I'll give this a shot to see if this is the opportunity for me. It was a direct result of me being in coaching, where I set a goal to create another revenue stream doing something I wasn't doing. And what I realized is, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this because I believe in what I'm doing, right? I believe in what I'm doing, and I see the opportunity. Really making sure, you hear this a lot in the coaching consulting space. To let's have a conversation to see if we're a good fit for one another, right? And a lot of times, I would look at that as almost like a negative, saying like, okay, it's like, well, everybody's a good fit, right? And in reality, that's not true. We've all had difficult clients. We've probably all been difficult clients at times, right? So one of the things that I've realized is in having those conversations with people now, in the tens of thousands of people that I've talked with over the past 20 years in this industry, one of the fascinating things is, like, I pick up real quick on whether somebody is a good fit or not, what their commitment level is, what they're actually, are they actually going to succeed and actually do the work, right? Because as well as I do, none of this matters if you don't do what you're signing up for, what you're applying, what you're learning, and if you're not applying, right? So what I've discovered is my belief in the conversations, how I show up in those calls or the meetings or events, like the state that I'm in, right? So if I come to a meeting, I was like, even before this today, like, I went and did some physical activity to get myself jacked up and excited and get my energy going, right? Versus, like, I could have rolled out of bed at 9:05, right? Right. And said, okay, I'm going to go do this podcast, right? Like, that's not going to serve anybody, right? So really, honestly, how I show up in the conversations, like, I will literally, I have the trampoline, I have all the stuff that, gets my blood flowing in between calls, especially when you're doing 12 hours of calls a day, during a big launch. Like, you have to keep your state and your energy up, and stay in the right frame of mind. But all of it starts with your belief in what you're actually selling, and then really knowing why what you want and why you want it. Because I can tell you, 90% of the people that I speak to have no clue what they're actually shooting for. They get stuck in the day to day, the mundane. Oh, I need a funnel, I need this, I need that, I need to generate more leads. But they're not even clear on the actual target of what they're shooting for the next 90 days or next year. Like, where would you like to ultimately be? And when you gain that, can help somebody gain that clarity, tie it in with your mindset of, and the strength and power that you bring to the call. You're really there to serve that person. And I can say I had this beautifully play out last week with a person that I got on the call with them. They were actually texting me saying, no, I'm not interested, to how do I pay, within 30 minutes. And it came down to my belief in what I do. But I was also, this is the best part for me, is like, a lot of times I'm an analytic, a recovering analytic. So I'm very detail oriented with stuff at times. And that can get in the way, right? Because I want to check off the boxes. Did I ask this? Did I do this? And go through it step by step. And what I can say is, going through that conversation, it was after a 12-hour day. I was exhausted. The last thing I felt like doing was getting on another call. And I was like, okay, this is all about changing lives. Go shift my energy, get excited, get fired up to go serve this person at the highest level. If it's a fit, great. We'll talk about that. And then when I saw the opportunity for them where they were, it was actually really a good fit for them, and they were stuck in scarcity around time. It wasn't a money issue. It was, time. I was able to just, genuinely take them through the process of like, this is the thing that could actually help you collapse time and create more of what you're looking for. Right. And that to me is like, I know that was the long the long answer to, to your question there around, what it takes and the mindset that I bring to every conversation. And I wish I could say it's like that all the time, right? We're all going to have days that are not perfect, right? We're going to have calls and conversations that, well, you're like, oh, that didn't go the way I thought it was, or the energy was off, or the person you just didn't resonate with, right? That's okay. Like, really do not be attached to the outcome. Like, I would love everybody to be a client, but what I also realize is that would probably drive me crazy because not everyone's going to do the work.
Yeah. You said lots of great things there. And I'd like to dig into some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about having clarity about your goals, because then you're something that you really want and you're shooting for, you're heading towards. And if you don't have that sense of clarity and purpose, then it makes it very difficult to take the daily actions that are going to get you there. It's so easy to make excuses not to do them. So how do we get more clarity around our goals? Is there a specific exercise that you do? Do you talk to yourself about it? Do you write things down? How do you find clarity around your goals?
One, hire a coach. Right? Because left to my own devices, it's like, I had a coach a few years ago say, he said, my goal is to get you to the point where you don't need a coach. And I was like, that will never happen. Like, I'm a black belt in martial arts. I know that it never ends, right? Like, I know that there's always learning. There's always, something going on. There's always changes in circumstances. And for me, like, there's nothing better than being able to get on call with a coach every week and just kind of, dump all the stuff I got going on, and for them to say, well, wait a minute, like, let's get clear on this. Like, where are we really going? Because I can complicate stuff really quickly, right? Right. So that would be the first step, right? Is, find a coach that can support you to get where you want to go and help you gain that clarity. And really, write down the things that are most important to you. Like, what I can say is, I'm not, I work with a lot of wealthy people, right? And one of the fascinating things to me is, most of them are not driven by the flashy stuff, right? They're not, driven by the Lamborghinis and it's like those happen to be byproducts of their success, right? Like, if they have that, but for everybody, it's not that, right? For me, it's always been about my home with my wife and children, and what I create for us and the memories we're able to create, and the impact that I get to have in my circle. And that circle is obviously immediate family, those around me, those I get to work with. But I'm very, this is another thing that for some people may be painful, right? Sometimes you got to stiff arm like they do in football here in the States, right? It's like, you got to keep people at a distance, right? And there's certain people you just don't let into that circle, right? You might let them in for a little while, right? Not saying you totally excommunicate people, but be really guarded. And what I've noticed for myself is, like, there's a very small group of people that I trust, right? Like that I would trust with my life, right? That are around me like my guard, right? And then every once in a while, something will creep in that will be not that person that should be in that circle, right? And it's like, okay, I can help them. I can point them in the right direction. They're not really a fit for me to, like, I'm not going to go hang out and have dinner with them, right? But they're just not the type of person that is going somewhere. Like, I just gravitate towards, somebody that's actually growing, striving, impacting, making a difference in the world. And it's nothing wrong with a person that's not doing that, right? But I always, like my good friend Ken MacArthur tells me, you have an impact in the world whether you want to or not, right? And it's like, at the end of the day, if you choose not to get better yourself and get better at, sales or build your business, or as a father or a wife, or, any of the things that we strive for and want as human beings, you're having an impact on the reverse side, right? Of, okay, this is what I get to see. And that's okay, because you're giving the person that you're raising, your children, the opportunity to see what they may or may not want in life, right? So it's all a lesson.
Yes, absolutely. And we are role models as parents, aren't we?
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not. how do we really stand and understand our value and show up with it on any sales conversation? Because I've come across so many clients who suffer from what I call imposter syndrome.
Mm.
They feel that that people aren't going to pay them what they want because people can't see their value, or they're not bringing enough value to the transaction, and maybe they can't fulfill their clients' expectations, or maybe there are other people who are better at doing that particular service than they are. So they undercharge, they really wobble when it comes to saying their price in the sales call. They don't put their price up, but they resent it because they feel that they're giving away too much for the value they're getting back and the investment they're getting back. So how do you really get to stand firmly with certainty in your values? Do you show up with it to the prospect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it definitely starts with that belief in what you're doing, right? Is a part of it, right? And what I personally do is I'll write down, any type of offer that I've ever created or any of I've been involved in. I'll write down all the benefits, of what it could help somebody achieve, right? And really assign and start to assign some type of dollar value to it, and say, okay, if all I did was help this person do this, right? Then what could that be worth to them, right? And a prime example would be like I have some clients or potential clients that I've been, I put an offer out and I'm actually hesitant on it because I got that intuition that's like, you know what, I really don't want to work with them, right? There's just that they don't see. It's not that they don't see the value. It's just a different mindset that they have that I picked up on. And what I realized was, one, I get to choose who I work with, right? So, and that's why I do go through that process of seeing if it's a good fit. But one of the things that came up was, well, they asked me this question: why are you the most expensive person? And I said, this goes back to, I always had this, I don't know where it came from. They just call it, sixth sense or whatever. But when I had my Victorian restoration company many years ago up in New Jersey, I remember I made the decision one day that I am not going to be the cheapest person out there. Right. I have overhead, I have employees, and I want to do quality work. And you can't do that being the cheapest guy on the planet. Right. Like, you won't survive. You're in business to make money. You're in business to make a profit, and for your reasons, for, whether, your family, the things you want in life. We only get to go around on this, this planet once that I know of. Right. Right. So what I would say is, the belief in what you're doing. When I would look at and stand in front of somebody as a young 21-year-old kid back then, where somebody would say, why are you 4 times higher than everybody else? I'm like, do you want it done right, or do you want it done half-ass? Right. That's really what it comes down to, is like, do you want it done the right way? Right. Because if you want it done the right way, I'm your guy. And me standing in that confidence got me way more work, because people said, this kid must know something. Right. And then ultimately, it led to me being the number one contractor in the area for that type of work. Right. And people knew, and it got me a lot of affluent clients. So as I've been, in this game now on the sales side of, from all different types of industries, what I've noticed is, when I have conversations that with people, whether they're just starting out or they have something established, whatever the area of expertise that they may have, when they come to me and I see that there's an opportunity for them to grow, I believe in what I'm doing, I will clearly make them the offer, right? And that for that price point. So if you're struggling right now and you're listening to this saying, how do I charge more? Here's what I can tell you. When I started coaching, again, because coaching was like a dirty word to me, I just hated it. After my experience with it many years ago, where it was just people just didn't do the work and they didn't follow through. They weren't doing this. I know we touched on this last time we spoke, right? But it was, one of the fascinating things was, as I started to go down this journey of uncovering what makes people tick. Why do I do certain things the way I do it? Why do I not do certain things? Why do I procrastinate? Why do I struggle in certain areas? And I started to uncover, right, that, obviously we all do things for our reasons, right? So for some people, it's more important, to make more money because they want a nicer home. For others, it's just they want to take care of their family, right? Or that whatever the thing is. But what I uncovered was, when I started coaching again, my belief at the time was $300. It was like, if I could charge somebody $300 a month and see if this works, right, then we'll see. Right now, this went from, I was charging $10,000 a day before, right? And then 6 years later, here I am at $300, right? Now, what happened to me, right? What happened to me was I was in a totally different industry, right? I didn't have the belief. I was still doubting, doubting the situation. And what happened was I started coaching people and they started getting results. And I'm like, okay, there's something here, right? Then guess what? Next month it went to 500. The next month it went to 750. Then the next month it was up to 1,000, right? Now it's 10 grand for 90 days to work with me, right? So when I see that, that journey for myself, like realizing that a lot of times people, don't have that. It's kind of like the first, first time somebody steps on the soccer field or the football field or the ice if they're playing ice hockey or whatever the sport is. Like you're not an expert the first day, right? You need to build that confidence, right? You need to build your sea legs, your ability to realize that you have something solid. And for many professionals, like you have experience, you have the skill sets to charge whatever you want. And really what you're going to find is when you start talking to the person that can afford the higher price points, it's a much different conversation and the results you can help them get are far greater, right? And the fact that they actually do what you're coaching them through or consulting them on, right? It's just so much more rewarding because you can serve them at a higher level, right? Versus like if you're selling somebody a $49 ebook, right? And you're charging $100 a month for coaching or a couple $100, whatever the thing is, like it's just you can't realistically serve lots of people. And usually at that price point, people are trying to figure things out and they're not as qualified, right? So higher ticket is definitely where it's at, right? Which is why I've always gravitated to that, and still to this day don't have a low ticket product, right? And I choose not to.
What is a mindset shift to higher ticket selling? I know this is a big question, but if you were to nail it down to one thing, you've said about belief. Mm-hmm. But if we were to go deeper into that, what is the one mindset shift needed to get into higher ticket selling?
The key thing would be when I look at the offer that you have, right? It all starts with the end in mind, right? So in my understanding of when I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm helping them create an opportunity and a plan to get where they want to go. And in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking like, can this actually fit what they're looking to do, right? So that I'm only having conversations with people that are in that place, right? Now, granted, not everybody fits that, right? Some people squeak through, but really the mindset that I have coming into that is, one of being a servant, like literally coming in to just serve people. Because I can tell you, when I was going through the phase of I need to make money, guess what would happen, right? I wouldn't make money, right? But then I would go through this phase of I'm just going to talk to as many people as possible and have conversations and make the offer, right? And here's what I know. If you don't put it out there, it's not going to happen, right? The more offers you put out there, the more opportunities you're going to have to open a new, new client relationship. So the mindset that I have going in is one of, coming in from a servant perspective, just really, loving people where they're at, understanding that like, they have stuff going on in their life, just like I do and everybody else. Get to know them on a personal level, and really find the buttons that will make them move, right? Because we're not aware of it, right? This is why I believe so much in coaching now is like, for me, like I know exactly what I'm supposed to do, but yet there's times I don't do it, right? And there's times where I'll get into a conversation, but like, I really don't want to close that because that's going to create more work for me, right? And then I go back to look at what am I in alignment with? Like, is this something that's actually going to get me where I want to go, or is it a distraction? And I think a lot of times, especially in the sales, in a sales conversation, no matter what the industry, if you don't have that belief and you don't have that clarity of why you're actually doing what you're doing, you might want to consider another industry to get involved in, right? That's going to be more in alignment with who you are, right, and what you want, because that goes back to my original story of where I started at, like why was I in the construction industry?
Yeah,
not that it wasn't a great experience. It just was. I started questioning like I don't want to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and never see my family till I'm retired. That's not enjoying life. So
yeah. So it really comes down to being sure that you're aligned and you're doing what that you love doing, because if that isn't the case, it's going to keep coming up and sabotaging you again and again and again.
Yeah. And also recognizing, because, I'm not like, you hear the stories or you hear the people talk out about there in the guru industry where they'll talk about the, you need to be passionate, do something you love. Right. And I believe that that's true. Right. You definitely want to do something you love. But here's the thing with doing something in this, crazy world we live in today with the internet and everything we have access to, there's a lot of things that we may not love, right, that are part of the equation to make that happen, right? So, an example that would be like, oh, well, you need to do a webinar, you need to do a, start a podcast, or you need to, like, all of these other things that you could add on to what you're doing. Sometimes some of those things could be a distraction, but what they could also be is a thing that, it's like, that's the thing that's going to help me get where I want to go, right? It's one piece of the puzzle, right? And if we don't like do that work, right, because everybody wants the results and very few people want to work for it, right? It's like you see the people in the world will, we'll all look at like, somebody like a Jeff Bezos or something like that and say, well, it must be nice to have that. I guarantee you wouldn't want to spend a day being him, right? With the amount of work that guy does, brilliant guy, right? I wouldn't, you couldn't trade, I wouldn't want to do what he does for the amount of money he has. Like, that's just not me. Because what that would mean to me is I'd have to sacrifice my lifestyle with my family, right?
Yeah. It's right. Keeping those values high up.
Right.
Now, we've had a few chats and you come across as a very calm person. Do you maintain that calmness when there's chaos going on all around you?
Yeah, I have. I've been referenced as the business Buddha at times, where there's like this calm, where like you could have servers breaking down, Facebook ad problems or whatever, and all this stuff, and I'm just like, okay, well, let's find a solution. It's not that I don't lose my cool from time to time, right? There's a tiger behind me for a reason, right? Right?
I see it.
Because there is that, and part of it's for me, like to really recognize, because I could be more timid. Right. I could be, definitely my nature has been to be more quiet and only speak when I need to, not speak up, and those types of things. But for me, the tiger represents, strength, tenacity, boldness. Right. And so there's times that needs to be addressed in a conversation where you need to take control. That's one of the big things I can tell you in a sales conversation is take control of the conversation. Right. This is an area that at times I still struggle with. I let people run and they'll take it down a path they want to because they have their agenda for the call, right? And my agenda set that frame right in the very beginning, right? The agenda is, this is why we're here, right? Help me understand why you booked this call, right? So I can see where they're at and map out the framework of what that call is going to look like so that at the end of the call, we can determine what the next step is for us, right? If you don't take that control, right, it just turns into a great conversation, right? And nobody gets helped, right? The client doesn't become the person doesn't become a client, and you don't, actually enroll somebody in your high ticket program, right? So there is a structure to it. I'm not a big fan of scripts, right? Because I believe that it can be inauthentic, if somebody's just sitting there reading something, right? But you definitely want to have 2 or 3 key things that you're covering, right? And I put it down into a simple framework of this. What do you actually want? Why do you want it? When do you want it by? And what's the mechanism that we're going to use to get there? And usually the mechanism is them hiring me, to, you want to lead down that path of the mechanism being the thing you're representing, right? That's how I'm going to help you build wealth, or how I'm going to help you, make more money, have a bigger impact in the world. So that would be a simple framework that anybody can follow, right? Without getting caught up in the conversations. And I'm sure you've had sales conversations with people, right? And you can tell when somebody's reading a script. And, usually when that happens with me, I'll literally tell them, hey, can you do me a favor? I was like, if we're not on video, I'll say, can we get on video? Because I want to see you, right? And I want to see you not reading a script.
That must frighten them.
Yeah. And they're like, well, what am I going to do then? I'm like, just have a conversation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like,
person to person conversation. Yeah. That's all it is. Yeah. I remember once this guy was selling to me and he had the script on the screen while we were talking. We were on screen, but he had the script on his screen, and his eyes kept going to the script. His eyes were reading the script. And I was so focused on him reading the script, I wasn't really listening to anything he was saying to me.
Right.
And it was so stilted and awkward, the whole conversation, because he wasn't, the conversation wasn't flowing from anything I said. He just went to the next question on his list.
Right.
So there was no flow at all.
Yeah. And that's the challenge with the scripts. I mean, they're great for giving you a high level understanding of a structure of a call, right? Of what it could look like, right? And of course, you got to start somewhere, right? For me, when I started doing a high level of calls, what I realized was like, okay, I just took a notepad and I said, okay, what are the 3 or 4 things that I can focus on that will lead me down this path of having a qualified person to talk to, and then I would build off of that and say, okay, well, here's a great conversation piece or starter, right? And what's funny is there's been times I literally had a call, I think like 3 weeks ago, where the woman gets on the call, and I think I had said something like, I don't know where I think she was in Colorado or something, and I said, is the weather warming up there, right? And she made a comment that just kind of like, it was like one of those like, why don't you just stab me with a knife, right? She says, oh, so cliche, typical sales conversation. And I said, I didn't ask you how the weather was. I'm asking you if it's warming up because it's winter still where you are. It's warm where I am and beautiful. And I don't care if we have this conversation or not, right? So I literally took the conversation right back and said, you know what, I don't need to be here, right? It's like, if you want to come to the call acting crazy, right? That's another thing is like, respect your time, right? And respect the fact that you're there to serve somebody, but don't let people walk all over you, right?
Absolutely.
And that person, that person did not become a client, and I wouldn't, even if they would have paid me 10 times more, I wouldn't have taken them on, right?
Yeah.
Because I could see immediately they were just in this place of thinking they were better than, they couldn't even have small talk, right? It was just like, let's get into the details. Now I get it. You got to understand the personality type of the person you're talking with so you can best serve them. But like, just in a simple little thing to get the conversation starting. Like if I had said, oh, well, is that where you raised your family, where, wherever she was living, right? She probably would have had another comeback for that as well, right? Right. So I'm aware of that. And that, the biggest factor for me is, does this person play well with others? Is this somebody that I would want in my inner circle, right? That I would actually enjoy working with, right? That is first and foremost over how much money they have or anything else, that we talk about, right? Is just, I want to make sure this person is really a genuine person that I would actually want to work with before anything else, because their time, you need to put them in a position where they need to qualify themselves with why you should let them become a client.
Absolutely. It's a two-way street. It has to be a fit on both sides, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And I think some of the viewers and listeners, and certainly I used to think this, I had to just take anyone who pays me, at the beginning of when I started my businesses. But now I realize that actually, because he said you do work with them, you spend time with them, they have to be open to coaching, and there's a relationship that you build with each and every client. And it's got to be a nourishing relationship so you can really get the most out of it.
Right. Yeah,
it's
definitely.
It's really important. It's become more and more important to me, and it's become more and more obvious to me as time's gone on. Daniel, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom around mindset and high ticket selling. It's been absolutely wonderful. I've learned so much from you. How do our listeners and our viewers find out more about you and the great work that you're doing?
The best way is you can find me on LinkedIn, right? And also the best way would be go to the website, DanielGiordano.com. Right. And, there's always free resources and opportunities there to connect with me.
Fantastic. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you, everyone who's been listening and watching. Really enjoyed having you with us. Till next time. Bye-bye for now.